What I wanted you guys to know for stipple is that you are going to use a really fine point and begin working with the darker areas. Well, the pupil is a really easy area. It's always really dark. Make sure you pay close attention to those really white areas as well. Leave those white. What about the gray areas? Well, we'll get there. For right now, let's start with the dark areas. Dark areas are going to have stipple, or in other words, dots, really close together. Again, we're not coloring with our markers, but making dots to show values. Okay, so let's look at my little bug here. What are some other areas that are dark? This little area here. And watch how I'm going to real slowly build up value. And if you have a brand new marker like mine, I got to kind of get it going on a piece of paper first. Those dots are supposed to be small. They're not supposed to be really big. If you're using your largest pen for the fine details, then you're not really following my directions. The best way to really wow with a stipple technique is to show those fine details, and using the extra small is a great way to start. You can always go darker, but you can't take away when you've made a mistake. Now, do I have other ways to fix little mistakes? Always. A big part of what I do in this class is work with mistakes. If you were in my last class, you would have seen how I royally screwed up my painting, and sometimes that's how things go. Sometimes you can fix it, sometimes you kind of have to just work with it, and sometimes you start over. So with this project, I want you to be able to kind of look at the big picture and try to work with your mistakes as opposed to starting over. So I'm starting with my darker areas. Again, we'll be going into the gray areas later. For now, let's just work on the areas where you can do what is easiest for a beginner and make dots in the dark areas. It gets trickier when you move into the gray areas, so keep that in mind. We'll get there, but just means you have to be more mindful of how many dots you make. I don't know if you can see, when I'm making my dots, I'm not making lines. Here's one thing not to do. If you're filling in a section and you want to go line by line, I don't recommend that, because in the long run you'll be able to see it. You might not see it on this because it's so small, but it's good practice to get into doing random. Do you see the difference? And filling in your dots randomly. So here is my random pattern if I'm doing a larger area. Right now I'm working in a very small area doing fine detail. You're not going to make the mistake of making lines in that spot, but it's an important thing to know about. So what I'm doing is just kind of going around. I have some heavy outlines that I might see, those kind of lines or details to start with. We'll go into the gray areas and blending later. Now when it comes to your background, you see this little bug's got all these teeny tiny little hairs on top. If you're working on areas like that, you're going to do the background. Those little lines are really fine white lines. I am not drawing in those lines. I'm not making a whole lot of detail there. I'm doing the outline of them for the background. So if you have a similar situation, try to show those tiny white lines by doing the background, if that makes any sense at all.
History, science. History is fun. I think science should be going in math. I need to study English tonight. I kind of. I'm almost. I think I'm halfway done. You are? You have to start doing it? Because I had the thesis already. And that's only 2 or 3 side paragraphs. You need 6 altogether then. Yeah, but you do 2 to 3 side paragraphs, you know? I think I'm done with those. For your first one. So I just need the conclusion and the counterpoint. I'm done. What do you need for that? Yeah, you need a closing. So you're not giving it done before. You should show me it. No. You can do this all over. You play creative. Yeah, we're not gonna get it anyway. Should have bought. But you have 2 kilos and you can have them. I want like 4.
Another thing to remember about your animal or bug or insect is that very rarely do you have perfect straight lines. My bug, for example, as I'm doing this little nose area or whatever that happens to be called, it's a very organic line. It is very kind of imperfect, would be a good way to describe it. So I want you to remember that. In nature, lines are very rarely perfect straight lines. They're more organic or jagged or imperfect, if you will. If you're itching to do a background, if you get, frustrated with doing the real fine detail, you can go with your biggest or maybe your medium marker. So for me, I'm going to go with this one here. And my dots it's a brand new marker, so I'm going to have to get it going first. My dots are going to be bigger, but I'm also filling in a larger area. Again, do not make lines with your dots. Try to go with a random pattern. The more random you do, the more natural your bug's going to look. Bug, flower, whatever you're working on. Your background is completely black. If your background is completely black like mine is, just know that I still want those little teeny tiny white areas to show so that my stipple is still being, showcased. I had a student once who did an incredible Bob Marley stipple project. She got to the black background and she took a giant Sharpie marker and colored it. You cannot fix that. It was still a really nice drawing, but you could 100% see that she went in with a Sharpie marker and colored. If you're going to do the stipple technique, you're jumping in with both feet to do the entire thing in dots. Okay, so now you've got an idea. I'm going to point out some things here. I did work in the gray area. Let's look at my picture so you can see him. This little gray area in his right eye. So what I did is I pressed lighter with my pen. So I'm controlling the dots by a couple things. They're spreading apart more, and I did not press hard. When I was doing my really dark areas, I was pressing somewhat hard. I wasn't lingering, or your ink might spread, but pressing hard to do your dots. Okay, I think that should be a decent introduction to get you guys going for